Hello everyone and welcome back to the Belgian Beer Brothers channel. Cedric here in Antwerp with yet another brew review. And today we are having somewhat of an oddity. What else is new? This beer is called Wildeman or Wildeman and is brewed by Frank Boon. And yes, indeed, that is the very same Frank Boon from the Heus. This is also brewed in Bokerijk. Now, let me explain. Bokerijk is kind of a historical theme park or an outdoor museum, if you will, and it strives to keep the old crafts alive or sometimes even revive them. And at a certain point they rebuilt het Paanhuis, an old brewery from Diepenbeek. Now, how could one ever have a brewery and not brew beer, I hear you ask? Exactly. So enter Frank Boon. In 2019, Bokerijk decided to get some life in their newly acquired brewery and celebrate with, you guessed it, a signature beer. Now, of course, not just any beer. They wanted to revive an old recipe, not entirely unlike safe beer, and try to brew it in an artisanal way before doing their own thing with it. They even organize some open brewing days every year where visitors can watch the brewers and even help out. Of course, outside of those events, the beer is mainly brewed by Boon in their own brewery in Limbeek. Now, the beer that they landed on is an Oud Maaslands bier, a high-density beer traditionally brewed with dark malts and malted spelt for the, let's say, upstanding citizen. And in true Boon fashion, it is then cut with 3-year-old oak-aged lambic, which results in a rather vinous and very storable beer with an ABV of 9%. Now, lastly, the name of this beer, Wildeman or Wildeman, is derived from a medieval legend about Knight Valentine and Wildman Orson. Also because 2019, when this was developed, was a commemorative year for 450 years of Pieter Bruegel den Oude, and Bokerijk happened to have an exposition on Pieter Bruegel. Now, that all being said, I am very curious, so let's have a taste. I did notice that in Untapped I have had this beer before, in 2020 when it was just out. I have no idea. So back then I gave it 3.25. I have no idea how my taste will have evolved or how this beer will have evolved. And because I forgot to bring in my taster glasses, I'm going to use this Trappist taster glass today. Blasphemy, might be, but hey, it's a nice glass. And as you guys know, with tiny tasters, it feels like we're having two today, so we're kind of cheating. I also saw that in Untapped this is described as a double. However, I don't know. It's a 9%er, so for a double that is quite high. And I think that the people that put it in Untapped just saw dark, double. But that is one of the problems I have with gamifying everything and crowdsourcing it, because some people with the least knowledge of all often are the ones that are most engaged, but that is a frustration for an entirely different video. So this is quite hazy, not to say quite murky even. I see some residue in the glass, even though I was rather careful. It does have a nice ruby red shine through this, I'd say, mud brown beer. And of course there's a lot of condensation on the glass, but even without, it's not that clear. So not a lot of foam, but we cannot forget that this has about, I think, an 8% part of 3-year-old lambic in it, which means tannins from the oak, probably a bit astringent, a bit of acidity, which is all very bad for foam stability, but not bad for the beer. So The little foam that we have is quite creamy. It is very beige, not dark, but very beige. And it also has some spots, some darker spots from yeast residue. So oh, smells quite nice. I'm getting a very sweet and sour sensation. They described it as vinous, and in the nose, yeah, a lot of wine. Like I said, tannins, a bit of woodiness, but it smells very refreshing and still very fruity. So this also reminds me a bit of Duivelsbier, also from Boon. I'll put a link up here. But Duivelsbier didn't have that lambic component. Also didn't have spelt. I'm getting a bit of molasses as well. Yeah, a bit fruity, a bit lemony. Okay, let's have a taste. Cheers. Ooh. That is nice. Now, full disclosure, this has been aging in the cellar for a while. I think I've had this for about a year. It was a gift from my parents who visited Bokrijk with my little niece, 8 years old at the time. So I'll probably have this for a year and a half now. Yeah, I very much like this. Initial flavor, first thing that I get is licorice. A tiny bit of molasses. It is nicely carbonated. It's hardly visible because of the murkiness, but it is very nicely carbonated. Rather sweet or sugary, but at the same time bitter as well, which is the influence of the dark malts in combination with a bit of hop as well. Although I think this beer is, well, it is not hop forward at all. And I think also knowing Frank Boon, he uses old hops to get the bacteriostatic effect, but not necessarily for the flavoring. So I think that most of the bitterness in this beer is drawn from the wood and from the darker malts. I even get a bit of chocolate, which also points directly to the malt. So, and there is some acidity and some freshness in this beer, some fruitiness. But if I didn't know this, I would never have guessed that this is cut with 3-year-old lambic. And I know that lambic tastes quite well. I actually know a bar that has it on tap full time. So yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that this would be such a good combination. I would have thought that this just has some lactic acid bacteria or something. Maybe to mimic yet another old brown or Rodenbach. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But yeah, this is a very, very nice effect. The combination of that rather dark brown beer and then the addition of about 1/12, I believe, of old lambic or aged lambic. 3 years is not that old. Very nice. Now, as it warms up, I do get a bit more of that lambic flavor. By the way, I do love this logo because Wildeman or Wildman actually translates to savage as well. So, yeah, nicely done. This is also a very dangerous beer. It just struck me that I said this was a 9%er, and I now understand why they put it in Untapped as a double, because it really tastes like 6.5, maybe 7 at most. So yeah, 9 yowza. And I think that any given night these would pour away quite easily. So although I think it is a bit too sweet for me, so I would probably just have 1 or 2, but I can imagine this competing with Kasteelbier, for example, or the explosion of rouge beers, red fruit beers, all those strong contenders. I must say that the aftertaste is a bit more vinous than the initial flavor, but maybe that's because the mouthfeel is a bit tingly. It is rather highly carbonated. So in the aftertaste there is that vinous component, a bit of tannins as well, but mainly I want to say a bit of licorice, the molasses, the brown sugar. Yeah, I think it's mainly that. All in all, nice beer. Is this my favorite? Absolutely not. But I do have a very deep respect for Frank Boom and for the mission that Bokrack has. Will it keep my old score of 325? I understand why 5 years ago I gave this a 325. I guess it will be higher this time, but not by much. I think this is gonna be an even 350 now, because despite understanding the historic value and the effort that went in this, and just the mere fact that this is brewed with spelt, which is a challenge in itself, and then cut with 3-year-old lambic, which is a beautiful, very work intense product. I'd rather have them separately and have one of these and then spend the rest of the night on that lambic. But nonetheless, yeah, 3.5 definitely. Nice beer. If you are into sweet and strong, and I do mean beer, go for it. Really, get your hands on one of these. I still have 3 of these. I think that I'm gonna hand them out amongst my friends. Maybe do a taster night, but that will be it for me. So 3.5. Yeah, as usual, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to support this channel, share a video, spread the word, or just sign in on the newsletter, maybe visit the Patreon page. If you guys have any suggestions or comments or questions, leave them down in the comments, and I will see you guys again next video with some beer, probably. Cheers, you guys.